I am Jeffrey Sims, a retired captain of Engine 69, which is affectionately termed the Harlem Hilton. Historically, one of the busier companies in the city of New York. Oh, I got there about 2003 as a captain. Yeah, I only worked there as a captain. But before that, I was in Charlie's house with Charlie. And I retired last February, 39 years in the fire department. My father was a fireman in Ladder 26. I'm going to say he got there about 1950 or 51. And I was in college, and I won't say I was totally rudderless, but he saw the path I was on. And he drove me and my friends to take the fire department test. Oh, you know what, just a little side. So in 1977, there was a blackout in the northeast part of the United States. New York City was total darkness for, I would say, 24 hours and maybe even longer. And when I came in the fire department, fellas were still talking about this particular night. The lights went out in New York City. And one of the famous quotes from that night is the Manhattan dispatcher on the air asking if there is any unit available for a fire that they had. They did that in Brooklyn too, and in the Bronx. And there were not enough firemen to respond to all the fires there were that night. There had been layoffs in 1975 and downsizing of the fire department. And July 13th, 1977, we ran out of firemen. And in August of 77, they hired 300. And they started hiring people after that. And so on December 3rd, 1977, I took a test. My father drove us there to take it, to become a New York City fireman. At the time, you know what, I was ready and anxious to. I was working in the health department as a lab technician. I won't say it was a total dead end, but I was pretty much where I was going to be. There wasn't a lot of room for promotion unless you got political, and it would have been all by appointment, or else go into medicine and become a doctor. So I took the fire department test, 77. I remember there was a big snowstorm, February of 78, and that's when I took the physical exam at the Armory in Bed-Stuy, which was near my community, Sumner Avenue Armory. And by October, they called me to get the job. So I scored well. Luckily, it worked out, and they hired me October 1978. I went to the Fire Academy, which was kind of new on Randall's Island. I was there about 6 or 8 weeks, I think it was 6 weeks. And then I was assigned to Engine 312 in Astoria, Queens. And I had never actually been to that part of Queens. I remember my father, I told him I was going to be assigned that night, and then I had to look at a department order. There used to be little orders published by the fire department, and every firehouse is given, every command is given one of these orders. And it's an official, document for the fire department. And he drove me to the nearest firehouse, which was Engine 234 and Ladder 123 in the 3-8 Battalion, to see if we could get a copy of the department order, and they weren't there yet. So a little disappointed, Pop said, "Don't worry." And he drove me to Division 15, where one of his old buddies used to work. It was Schillings, Matty Schillings, was the deputy chief there at the time. And we went inside, we saw the deputy, told the deputy I'm a new man coming in the fire department, and I'd like to know if the orders are available. I can see where I'm assigned. I'll never forget the deputy started looking at the order, and they were small pages, and he started looking, and it starts engine 3, engine 5, engine 9, and he went all the way, engine 150, and it went all the way to engine 212, 213, and what's your name again? And he turned it over on the other side, 312. Jeffrey Sims, yes, this is where you're assigned. And then he said, oh, I think that's an interchange company. And that was the hook right there. It turned out 312 was an interchange company. So it's only 1978. The city is still burning. The Bronx is burning down. And they were sending Queens companies to the Bronx every third night or every fourth night to relieve the Bronx companies because they were getting slammed. So I got assigned to an interchange company. When I got to 312, they explained what the interchange was, and every third or fourth night we were in the Bronx, engine 92 on Mars Avenue, 167th Street, fighting the South Bronx fires. So that was very exciting for a young fireman, very exciting. It was like going to war. Arson for profit. Arson for profit. In retrospect, I think they might have known, but it became definite in the 80s when they finally decided to do something about it. And when I say arson for profit, I mean the landlords were burning their buildings down, but then the tenants were building burnings down, and then the landlords were paying tenants. So everyone was in on it because the profit of some of those old tenements in the Bronx was to burn it down and collect the insurance. So they changed that law where if the fire department deems your fire suspicious, the insurance company would hold your money until it's resolved. And like you turned off a light switch, fires went out, that stopped. Yeah, also for profit. It wasn't just New York City, it was Detroit, Chicago. It was throughout the United States. Oh, so I was a fireman in Brooklyn, downtown Brooklyn. And in that firehouse was stationed the Brooklyn Borough Command. So I knew a lot of the big chiefs. And while I was in the officer training, they call it first line supervisors, while I was there, I asked one of the chiefs I knew, oh, I'd like to go to the 15th Division, where Matty Skillens was still a chief out there. And I remember he wrote it down. But of course, when the order came out where I was assigned up to the 5th Division, which was Harlem at the time. 5th Division doesn't exist anymore. Again, cutbacks, I guess during the Giuliani years. Or was it the Caccia years? No, I guess the Giuliani years. They closed down the 5th Division. So Harlem no longer has its own division. There used to be 2 divisions in Harlem. There was a 4th Division, which was the 3rd Avenue, 102nd Street. And then they had the 5th Division, which was initially on 139th near City College. And they closed both of those divisions down. Less chiefs, just less service. It's key though, because the chiefs now, they had to respond to those Harlem fires. We used to those wrecks of a shell of vacant buildings in the Bronx. And so when they saw a building in Harlem, they didn't feel that affinity that someone from Harlem would have. And I don't want to say they were quick to abandon all hope and get the troops out of the building, but having a vacant building on fire on your block, and everyone has to move out, no one could live there, so all those people now are homeless, and then that building stays empty, and a lot of times if it's not sealed properly, squatters in there, and it's like a cancer that grows. And worse is if they tear that building down, which they were doing in Harlem. Now there's access to the rear of all the other buildings from the street. And that just starts a whole precipitous decline of the entire block after that. So it kind of grows like that. And if you don't have a chief that's invested in the community, even better if he's part of that community. And you have a chief coming from the Bronx, maybe he lives East Long Island somewhere, and he's not really going to risk, which, you know, it's a subtle judgment call when it's time to get out of the building and give it up, make a defensive action. So a lot of buildings burned down in Harlem. I'm not going to say we didn't try to put the fires out, but some people more prone to a defensive operation. Let's just let that building burn down, especially when Ed Koch became the mayor. There was actually a thought in those days that the city was too big. Places like Mexico City and Sao Paulo, Brazil, were just out of control. And they felt that, you know what, maybe a city shouldn't have 8 million people. And I think there was a city planning effort to reduce the size of the city. And of course that meant the minority areas. And so Koch actually started tearing down those buildings. It wasn't until the 80s that those vacant buildings. Now, justifiably, they were a liability. Because if someone got hurt when a brick from a vacant building fell on their head, they were a liability. If someone was in there, probably illegally because it wasn't sealed properly, liability. So both of those things were why the city actually turned into vacant lots. And if you saw pictures of the Bronx in the 70s, there were vacant lots. You could see for blocks before you saw another building. So true. There was a period of time in the South Bronx where you had to go to bed with your coat on because you didn't know if in the middle of the night you'd have to evacuate that building for a fire. And there was actually a cadence to the evacuation. You would see the men with the dogs, followed by women with little children that had to be carried, followed by children that could walk on their own. And they would all go sit in a car until they saw the hose come out of the building. And then they'd go back and see what they had left. Yeah, there was like a nightly routine. I met Dudley Glass when I was a fireman in Brooklyn. He was the assistant borough commander. But Dudley knew my father. He was from Harlem. And so I knew of Dudley before I met him. But he would see me in the firehouse as he came and left the building. So, yeah, Dudley Glass. His reputation preceded me actually meeting him. So he was always fine with me, and I never had any problems with Dudley Glass. But Dudley Glass came to the fire department in 1947. I want to say that's the same year that Jackie Robinson integrated baseball. So there had been black people in the fire department, but after World War II, and I mean immediately after, you started getting a bunch, and when I say a bunch, I mean a few, not a lot, but it was a big thing. And so you would have firehouses where maybe there had never been a black man assigned to that firehouse ever. And probably that happened to Dudley Glass. He was assigned to Engine 91. Plenty of black guys there now, but in those days, he would have been the only one. And they gave him a hard time. It was not easy for Dudley Glass. But Dudley decided he would show them. And he studied, and he got promoted, and he became their boss. And then if Dudley came into your firehouse and you were not squared away, only by the book. He wasn't, punitive. But you better have your uniform squared away. You better have your regulations up to date. Dudley was straight shooter like that. He was very strict and would give you a hard time if you thought he wasn't going to. So Dudley never forgot his treatment of some of the people. But I don't think he really ever hurt anyone, and he was excellent at fires. Dudley rose right through the ranks, and he became a deputy chief. And after that, it's all appointments. The mayor has to like you, and you have to be on board with the commissioner's agenda. And Dudley went right up. I believe he was a 4-star chief. He might have been chief for fire prevention when he retired. So when I knew him, he was a 2-star chief, assistant borough commander in Brooklyn. And he probably got his own borough. Ooh, I missed that. I didn't realize I missed it. I've retired since February. And you know what? The weather was beautiful all summer. There was plenty of activities to do. But then those hurricanes struck, first in Texas, then in Florida and Puerto Rico. And I found myself ready to go. So I've been trained over the years that when tragedy strikes or some kind of catastrophe, that I'm ready, geared up to respond. So I had that feeling. Of course, I fought it. I stayed right here. I didn't go anywhere. But that was interesting that because I knew they were calling guys up to go down there. In fact, the fire department probably did send a contingent down there. I know they deployed the incident management team, which I was a part of. And we kind of go nationally, We kind of go nationally. When they had that Oklahoma bombing, I was search and rescue. They went down there and actually took over the rescue operation. Yeah. Ray Downey, who was killed 9/11. So, one of my favorite stories, fire stories. I was a young fireman, and the fire trucks where the guy is in the back with only a steering wheel. So it's called a tiller rig. And I was driving the tiller. And it was the second alarm. We were responding on the second alarm. And it was a fire right on the same block with ladder 105. I was in Brooklyn at the time. And their tower ladder. And when we arrived on the second alarm, which they were only there a few minutes, the entire fire building was on fire. I'm talking 4 floors on fire, totally on fire. And the building next door, because of the ventilation shafts, and it had spread to the exposure building. So it was in another building, fully occupied building. Both buildings had been fully occupied. So unusual to have so much fire everywhere. And 105 had their bucket up already, and we're pulling up, and we're going to pull right in front of the fire building, the exposure building, and put up our ladder. And I would have been the first one up that ladder. That was my position. So we're pulling the rig into position, and the chief comes out, and he's screaming, no, I want a towel ladder here. I want a towel ladder. So we actually had to back out of that spot because it would have been a prime spot for a towel ladder. And as we're backing out, I get off the rig and I hear a roar in the crowd. And I look over at the crowd, ooh, and I see that they're looking at the building. And I look up at the building and there's 2 little boys. One of them, the older brother, 2 brothers, and the older one, he couldn't have been more than 11. And a younger brother in the window behind him, maybe 4 or 5. And the older brother is out the window, standing on I call it the lintel of the window underneath him, holding on with one hand, standing the outside of the building, and a little brother in the window behind him. And the crowd roars, and I looked up, and oh, this kid was in trouble. He was in trouble. Heavy, thick black smoke coming out of that window. The room he had just come out of. And now the chief is calling for a ladder. Of course, my ladder would have been right there, but that's not the story. So with that roar, everyone realizes the children are on the outside of the building. Ladder 105, he drops, he was using we call it a stag, but it's an exterior stream with a lot of water coming out of it, like 800 gallons a minute. And he dropped it, and it points down and hits the sidewalk and waters. And he starts moving the bucket over to the window with the children. And as he gets close to the window, but not there yet, big puff of smoke comes and the child jumps for the bucket. And he misses it. But it was a big guy, in the bucket from 105, and I knew his name too. Mike, I think his name was Mike Borscht. Was it Mike? Anyway, Mike reached out of the bucket and grabbed the kid on the way down and put him back up into the bucket. And the crowd went crazy. Whoa! I think that was the most proud moment I ever was in the fire department. That was tremendous rescue. He got a medal for that. 2 seconds later, the second child is rescued by a fireman from R2. Oh, who was that? Was that Gary? You know what? I can't remember now. And he jumps into the bucket. And a second after that, the flames are shooting out. I mean, that was an incredible rescue. Mike Borscht, I think his name was Mike. He got a medal for that. That was a real proud moment. I've been in some sticky situations. When I came in, we didn't have those breathing masks. We did have them, but they were in a suitcase, and they came out after the fact. So we used to call ourselves smoke eaters, and we would take a feed. And I'm going to say by the 80s, that was over. We had these much better, lighter, full-face masks, and that was a huge change. And then we had saws, power saws, gas, and oil operated, two-stroke, I think the two-stroke saws, and then we had some modern equipment too. Everyone has a radio. There used to be hand signals in the old days. Just the dispatching changed. A lot of technological advances. More changes. Thermal imaging cameras. Hazardous materials is a big thing now. Years ago, we had a Geiger counter at the fire department. There used to be a radio signal for a nuclear attack. That's out, thank God. That signal is out. But we think about dirty bombs, and there's a whole terrorism thing going on. Then there's drug factories with volatile chemicals. There's a lot of stuff going on. But they weren't able to train dogs or monkeys to put out fires, so they still needed us. So the dogs don't like smoke, so they'll never train a dog to. Though they can only get people to do that. So I think there'll be a job for us. We won't get replaced. But you know what? I got lucky and managed to get myself out of a few sticky situations. But for the most part, very rewarding. To carry a limp, lifeless child out of a fire building and have the child jump back to life when they see the parent comes. There's no better feeling than that.